One of the hardest things to understand when you first get started about this is about the depth and layers of folders that are existing when you make a new Ionic app. And you have to be really careful that you're in the right place before you start to work on anything, because it just won't function if you don't have the right place on your current command line. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate, in my case, to my D drive. So I'm going to do CD, which is change directory, D:, and I'm now, as you'll see, in my D drive. It's showing that I'm in my D drive. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. I could do this in Windows Explorer, but I might as well do this while I've got it here. Make directory, and I'm going to call it 318 apps. So I'm going to do that. So make directory 318, and you see nothing. Brilliant, isn't it? But what can happen is if I do CD 318 apps, I'm now inside that folder. So before I'm shamed and show you all my folders and stuff, let's go to my D drive, and you'll see I've got a folder 318 apps. Nothing in it, but the folder has been created by the command line. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into this particular folder, and I'm going to create a folder called First App. Okay, so I've got my folder called First App. Let's just change to that. And I'm now in that folder. So now we can create our Ionic application. So this is going to be based on the Angular framework. For the moment, just follow and do. Don't try and work out what's happening too much. Glad for you to do research, but just follow and do. So we give it the following command. I'm going to maximize the whole thing so we get a better stand. Ionic start. Now that means make me a new app. First App. Okay, that's the name of our app, First App. And I'm going to do it on a tabs style. And I want it to be based on Angular. Now this will change when we move out of beta, and it may well be out of beta by the time you get to look at these videos, and I'll revisit this if I have to. Equals Angular. Now what's happened in the past is when it's gone out of beta, the old command still worked. So I'm going to create my return, and it's created the directory. There's a lot for it to do, and you'll see that this can take quite a while for it to run. So I'll just let it run, and you'll see what's happening. So the application is being created. What we'll do now is get to look at it. So let's just clean that up a bit. So let's go into my command prompt, and I'm going to type the word clear. And that takes us back, gets rid of all the old commands, and we can see what's happening. Now, what's happened is that inside my folder First App, a new folder has been created called First App. And that's where our application lives. And you can see that the word master appears here. And that's really good, because that's what Git bash does for us. It gives us this sense of where we are within the navigation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to type the word code, and I'm going to put a full stop. Now what that does is, because we installed Visual Studio Code inside our terminal, we can actually launch our Visual Studio Code because it's been added to the path. So I hit return, and what will happen is that Visual Studio Code will open up inside this directory, and here it goes, and it opens up. Isn't that good? So there's our Ionic app, and you'll see that, and if I maximize this, it'll probably make things clearer. There's the folder. Now everything we do is going to be inside the source folder. So that's what we're going to do, and mostly it'll be inside our apps folder. What we'll do now is we'll spin this app up just to check that it works. So how do we do that? One of the great things about Visual Studio Code is that it has a built-in terminal. Now you can do view, and you can get to the terminal through that. But there's a shortcut. So if I put Control, I'm holding down Control, and I'm going to type the apostrophe mark, which is underneath the @ sign on my keyboard, and that opens up my terminal. Now you'll see I've launched this terminal, and mine is automatically defaulting to Bash, and you can do that, and you can select the terminals that you've got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the run command to get this Ionic application started. How I do that is I type Ionic serve. Now when I press return, what will happen is my default browser will open up with our application, and it will open up on port 8100, and you'll see our application. Now it won't look much like a mobile application at the moment, but you'll see that at least we've demonstrated the functionality. So what we can do is type that, Ionic serve, and it will open up. You see it's selected port 8100, and my default browser is Chrome on this machine. This works really well in Edge. Firefox is a wee bit iffy sometimes on some of the things it does, but Chrome, Edge, they're both very good for running Ionic apps. But by the time you get this, the Firefox issues may have been resolved, of course. So we're opening up in port 8100, and what we'll do is we'll just make this look a wee bit more like a mobile app. Waiting for localhost, and there's our app. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that just to make it look a little bit more like an Ionic app, or sorry, a mobile app. I keep saying Ionic app. And what I'm going to add here is I'm going to add the debugging controls. So I've pressed F12, and you can see I've got issues with my web server. You probably won't see any red lines here. So there's our app. Now if I press About, the About page opens. If I press Contact, the Contact page opens. And I think you'll see that's roughly what an app should look like. You haven't got any nav that you would see in a web browser, but this actually is a web browser. And these are all web components which are running inside this browser emulation. And you can see that actually within the tools within Chrome, you can change it to be different types of iPhone X. Let's see what that looks like. And you can see that's an iPhone X. The ratio of width and height is then changed, so you can check it out in various types of environments. So what we'll do is we'll stop that now. And how do I stop that? I go here and I press Control and C. And you can see I get my command line back to the master folder, and our application is working. There's an alternative to what you can do, and that's called the Ionic Lab. -L. So if I do Ionic serve -L, now I have to install this before I can do this, and you would have to do the same, but it's very easy installation, and it will prompt you through that when you do. And this in many ways is a nice way to view your application, because it's not really a browser, but it is a browser, and it gives you the two common environments straight out of the bat. So let's just maximize that, and you'll see it's going to give us an emulation of iOS and Android side by side. So what you can do is you can do changes in your code, and you'll see them reflected immediately within this environment. So it gives you a really good indication of how things will look. You'll notice that on Android, for example, when you have something in this command bar or the title bar, it's done on a left aligned, and here it's center aligned and so forth. And you'll see the different components of the iOS system. The logos are, sorry, the icons are different on the toolbar, so you can see the differences in between them. So that's a really good way of testing our app, and I'll go back here and I'm going to do Control C, and I've finished it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you one last thing which is really important about how we work with Visual Studio Code and Ionic apps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to relaunch it within the default browser 8100 rather than the lab, and we'll show you this feature that's really, really important. So I'm going to type in here Ionic serve, and that will launch it in the browser. So my application has launched. Now let me just show you how I like to work inside the environment. I like to take this window and press my Windows key and the left arrow. I want this on the left, and then I want my Visual Studio Code alongside it. And I find that this is a really good environment in which to work. So I'll put my tools back on here, F12, and I'll do that. And that's me side by side. Because what I want to show you is that if I go into my app and go to my home page, go to home.page.html, you'll see this is the text here that you're seeing there on the left hand side in the emulation in the browser. So if I now do a change, hello world, you'll see that we're going to have to do a save. That little green thing says there's a save due. And if I do Control S, it saves. If I now refresh this, my new content is there. Hello world, the world is your oyster. Now in your case, that should happen automatically once you click Control S. My web server, as I've said, is acting up, so I have to manually refresh, and you see I'm getting all these errors. On a different machine, no problem at all. I need to reboot this machine from scratch because it's got so much junk on it. But that's a really good thing, and this is called live reload. You'll see that this is really effective. If I do it again, put a break in there, Control S, and then reload. A lot of this stuff will be very familiar to you from your new line, done really easily. But yours will automatically update the browser view here the minute you press your Control S. So I hope everything has worked exactly as I've shown you here. Mine works, and if yours doesn't, you haven't followed it correctly. I'm going to say that quite a lot, I think, and it sounds very brutal, but I have to be really clear. If you do as I tell you, yours will work. What will happen next is we'll start to look at the emulation app that we're going to build that helps you to create an application for your assignment. So that's where we'll go next.